Before we begin, let's establish something crucial. This isn't a defense of Andrew Tate as a person. His alleged criminal activities are what they are. But here's the uncomfortable truth that his critics refuse to acknowledge. On almost every major cultural and social observation, Andrew Tate is absolutely, devastatingly correct. This is what makes him so dangerous. He's not just some random internet personality spouting nonsense. He's a deeply perceptive social critic who has identified real problems in modern society and then offered solutions wrapped in masculine bravado. His critics attack his personality and ignore his insights, which is exactly why he keeps winning. The most terrifying thing about Andrew Tate isn't that he's wrong about everything. It's that he's right about almost everything, and our inability to acknowledge this is precisely why millions of young men flock to him despite his obvious flaws. The Matrix is real. When Tate talks about the Matrix, he's describing something that social scientists have been documenting for years. The way modern technology has created systems of control and manipulation that most people don't even recognize. Tate consistently argues that social media is designed to make people weak, distracted, and controllable. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's documented fact. Former tech executives have written books about how these platforms are deliberately engineered to be addictive. Sean Parker, Facebook's founding president, literally admitted they were exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. Tate argues that constant digital stimulation is destroying people's ability to focus, work hard, and achieve real goals. Neuroscientist Anna Lundke's research on dopamine and addiction confirms exactly what Tate has been saying. Constant micro-rewards from phones and social media are literally rewiring our brains to seek easy pleasure instead of meaningful achievement. While others celebrate content creation and influencer culture, Tate recognizes it for what it is. A system where human attention becomes a commodity to be harvested and sold. The fact that billions of people spend hours daily scrolling through feeds while tech billionaires profit from their distraction is exactly the kind of exploitation Tate identifies. The terrifying part? He's describing a real problem that mainstream culture refuses to address seriously. While everyone else celebrates digital connection and democratized content creation, Tate cuts through the nonsense and identifies the psychological manipulation underlying it all. Western society has systematically eliminated masculine virtues and replaced them with feminine ones, creating a generation of weak, directionless men. Traditional masculine traits like aggression, competitiveness, risk-taking, and hierarchical thinking have been systematically pathologized in modern society. Schools punish boys for behavior that was once considered normal. Toxic masculinity has become a catch-all term for any male behavior that makes people uncomfortable. The data supports Tate's observation. Boys are failing in school at unprecedented rates. Young men are increasingly isolated and directionless, male suicide rates are skyrocketing, and fewer men are attending college or starting families. Something is clearly wrong with how we're raising and treating men. Tate's observations about women's mating preferences align perfectly with evolutionary psychology research. Women do tend to seek partners of higher status, resources, and competence. This isn't controversial. It's evolutionary biology. The dating app data confirms what Tate has been saying. Women consistently rate 80% of men as below average in attractiveness and compete for the top 20% of males. Tate argues that modern dating culture has become toxic, with women having unrealistic expectations while men lack the skills and confidence to lead relationships. The statistics support this. Marriage rates are plummeting, divorce rates remain high, and both men and women report unprecedented levels of loneliness and relationship dissatisfaction. The terrifying truth is that Tate's diagnosis of modern sexual dynamics is largely accurate, even if his prescribed solutions are often harsh and direct. Tate's analysis of progressive political culture is brutally perceptive, even when wrapped in crude rhetoric. Tate argues that modern society has created a system where expressing certain opinions can destroy your life and career. This isn't paranoia, it's documented reality. People have lost jobs, been expelled from universities, and had their lives destroyed for expressing views that were mainstream just decades ago. Tate observes that major institutions like universities, corporations, and media companies have been captured by progressive ideology and actively discriminate against dissenting viewpoints. The research on ideological diversity in academia, hiring practices at major corporations, and media bias confirms exactly what Tate has been saying. Though he doesn't use this term, Tate's observations about elite hypocrisy align perfectly with Rob Henderson's research on luxury beliefs. Ideas that confer status on the upper class while imposing costs on the working class. Elite progressives celebrate polyamory, drug legalization, and family breakdown while living in stable marriages in safe neighborhoods. Tate argues that progressive culture uses shame, guilt, and social pressure to control behavior rather than legal force. This is exactly what Michel Foucault described as disciplinary power. Control through internalized surveillance and self-regulation rather than overt coercion. Tate's economic observations are particularly insightful, even when he uses them to justify questionable business practices. Tate argues that traditional employment is a form of modern slavery where people trade their most productive hours for barely enough money to survive. The data supports this. Real wages have stagnated for decades while productivity has increased massively. Most people work jobs they hate to afford lives they don't want. Tate consistently argues that schools deliberately keep people financially ignorant to maintain their dependence on the system. This is demonstrably true. American schools teach virtually nothing about money, investing, or wealth building, while simultaneously promoting debt-based consumption. Tate argues that central bank monetary policy is essentially theft from savers and workers. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's mainstream Austrian economics. When governments print money, they're literally devaluing the currency that working people use to store their wealth. Tate argues that building your own business is the only way to escape economic slavery. While his methods are often questionable, his core insight is correct. Entrepreneurship is the most reliable path to financial freedom in a system designed to keep employees dependent. Tate's observations about modern comfort culture align perfectly with serious academic research on resilience and human development. Tate argues that modern society has eliminated necessary struggles and hardships, creating a generation of weak, fragile people. This mirrors the research in The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, which documents how overprotection has created unprecedented levels of anxiety and depression among young people. Though he doesn't use Nassim Taleb's term, Tate's philosophy embodies the concept of anti-fragility. The idea that systems and people become stronger through stress and challenge. His emphasis on cold showers, hard training, and voluntary discomfort aligns with research on hormesis and stress adaptation. Tate argues that modern therapy culture encourages people to wallow in their problems rather than solve them. While therapy can be helpful, there's truth to his observation that therapeutic language has become a way to avoid personal responsibility and maintain victim status. Tate's analysis of modern status competitions is remarkably sophisticated. Tate argues that most people are playing elaborate status games with money they don't have to impress people they don't like. The consumer debt statistics confirm this. Americans are drowning in debt to maintain lifestyle facades. Tate observes that social media has turned everyone into performers competing for attention and validation. This aligns with sociologist Irving Goffman's work on the presentation of self, except now the performance is constant and global. Tate argues that most influencers are actually broke and selling false dreams to desperate people. The data on influencer income confirms this. The vast majority make almost nothing while promoting lifestyles they can't afford. This is where Tate's insights become most important and most dangerous. Tate argues that modern society has eliminated traditional male roles and purposes without replacing them with anything meaningful. The statistics on male depression, suicide, and social withdrawal suggest he's onto something real. Tate's observations about how women compete with each other through displays of victimhood and virtue signaling align with evolutionary psychology research on female intersexual competition strategies. Tate argues that physical weakness breeds mental weakness, and that modern men have become pathetically weak. Research on exercise and mental health, testosterone levels, and physical fitness trends support his basic observation. The terrifying thing is that Tate has identified a real crisis in masculinity and then offered a solution that often makes things worse. His alpha male persona is performative, but his diagnosis of the problem is largely accurate. Tate's critique of modern education is devastatingly accurate. Tate argues that schools are primarily designed to create compliant workers and consumers, not critical thinkers. The historical evidence supports this. The Prussian model of education that most Western countries adopted was explicitly designed to create obedient citizens and factory workers. Tate observes that college degrees have become increasingly worthless while becoming increasingly expensive. The data confirms this. College costs have increased far faster than inflation while graduate outcomes have declined. Tate argues that student loans are a form of modern slavery that trap young people in debt before they understand what they're signing up for. With average student debt approaching $40,000 and many graduates unable to find work in their fields, this observation is hard to dispute. Perhaps Tate's most sophisticated insight is his understanding of how modern systems create the illusion of choice and agency while actually limiting both. Tate argues that voting in democratic systems is largely meaningless because the real power lies with unelected bureaucrats, corporations, and international organizations. The research on democratic responsiveness suggests he's largely correct. Public opinion has minimal impact on policy outcomes. Tate observes that consumer capitalism offers infinite trivial choices like which brand of cereal or which streaming service while eliminating meaningful choices about how to live. This aligns with political theorist Sheldon Bolling's concept of managed democracy. Tate argues that most people are funneled into predetermined career paths that serve the system rather than their own interests. The data on job satisfaction and career mobility suggests he's identifying a real phenomenon. Tate's analysis of pornography's effects on society is particularly insightful. Tate argues that pornography is deliberately addictive and designed to keep men passive and sexually satisfied without requiring them to develop real relationships or social skills. Neuroscience research on pornography addiction confirms exactly what he's been saying. Tate argues that pornography consumption makes men more passive and less assertive. While controversial, research on pornography use and masculinity suggests there may be truth to this observation. Tate's analysis of media manipulation is remarkably sophisticated. Tate argues that modern media is designed to demoralize and discourage people from taking action in their own lives. The research on media consumption and mental health supports this. Constant negative news consumption is strongly associated with depression and anxiety. Tate observes that media companies use emotional manipulation to control public opinion and behavior. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's documented advertising and propaganda technique. Tate argues that entertainment media is designed to keep people distracted from real issues and personal development. The data on media consumption and achievement suggests he's identifying a real phenomenon. Tate has identified real problems with modern culture, relationships, economics, and social systems. His observations align with serious academic research across multiple disciplines. But Tate's proposed solutions often involve manipulation and exploitation. His alpha male persona is performative rather than authentic, his relationship advice is often manipulative, and his business practices are frequently questionable. Tate presents his solutions as the only alternative to modern degeneracy. This creates a false choice. Either accept the problems he identifies or embrace his solutions. Tate packages his insights in confident, charismatic rhetoric that appeals to frustrated young men. His certainty and success make his message compelling even when the content is harmful. The mainstream critique of Andrew Tate focuses on his personality and behavior while ignoring his insights. This is exactly why he keeps winning. Critics focus on Tate's alleged crimes and offensive statements rather than engaging with his social observations. This allows him to position himself as a truth-teller being persecuted by the establishment. By dismissing everything Tate says as misogyny or toxic masculinity, critics avoid addressing the real problems he identifies. This leaves those problems unsolved and drives more people toward Tate's solutions. Critics tell young men that Tate is wrong but offer no alternative explanations for their struggles or practical solutions for their problems. This creates a vacuum that Tate fills. By trying to silence Tate rather than debate him, critics actually confirm his narrative about establishment control and censorship. This makes him more appealing to his target audience. From a philosophical perspective, Tate represents something Nietzsche predicted: the emergence of new value systems in the wake of traditional religious and cultural collapse. Nietzsche predicted that the collapse of traditional religious values would create a crisis of meaning and purpose. Tate's appeal comes partly from his ability to offer meaning and purpose to young men who feel lost in a post-religious world. Tate's philosophy embodies Nietzsche's concept of the will to power, the drive to overcome obstacles and assert dominance. While Nietzsche's version was more sophisticated, Tate's crude version appeals to people who feel powerless. Tate positions himself as a kind of Superman who has transcended conventional morality and social rules. This appeals to people who feel constrained by modern social expectations. Tate's critique of modern progressive culture echoes Nietzsche's analysis of slave morality: the tendency of the weak to redefine virtue in ways that favor weakness over strength. The most terrifying thing about Andrew Tate isn't that he's a controversial figure or that he makes extreme statements. It's that he's largely correct about the problems facing modern society, and our inability to acknowledge this is precisely why he's so influential. Instead of dismissing Tate entirely, we need critics who can acknowledge his accurate observations while offering better solutions. Young men need alternative explanations for their struggles and practical solutions for their problems. Simply telling them Tate is wrong isn't enough. We need to honestly confront the problems Tate identifies: the masculinity crisis, the effects of technology, the economic exploitation, the cultural contradictions. Instead of pretending they don't exist. Most importantly, we need solutions that address the real problems Tate identifies. The tragedy of Andrew Tate is that he's one of the most perceptive social critics of our time, wrapped in the package of a toxic influencer. Until we can separate his insights from his solutions, he'll continue to win because he's the only one willing to acknowledge uncomfortable truths about modern society. The Matrix is real. The system is rigged. Modern culture has serious problems. Andrew Tate is right about almost everything, and that's exactly what makes him so dangerous. His critics' inability to acknowledge this is precisely why millions of young men continue to follow him despite his obvious flaws. The question isn't whether Tate is right. It's whether we can find better solutions to the problems he's correctly identified. Until we can, he'll continue to fill the vacuum with his alternatives, and young men will continue to follow him because he's the only one telling them the truth about their world. That's the real terror of Andrew Tate. Not that he's wrong, but that he's right, and society is too afraid to admit it.